Hello and welcome back to the Hibs Observer. It's at lunchtime briefing this Monday afternoon, slightly later time, but it's Monday after all, I suppose. I've got Patrick McPartlin here with me as always, and we're obviously still in the midst of the international break, counting down the days till the return of domestic football. But I suppose where Scotland are at these days, these breaks aren't as much a slog as they used to be. But again, there's still plenty to talk about from a Hibs point of view. Obviously, no game for the first team at the weekend there, but it was still a special occasion up at Easter Road. It was all about David Gray and his testimonial. Like in a Hibs 11 taking on a 11 of former Manchester United players. Patrick, you were there for us. Was it a kind of fitting day for the great man?
Yeah, I think so. I think it was a bit of a shame. Like, I mean, there could have been a bigger turnout, but the middle of an international break, you've got October holidays as well. Obviously, the cost of living affects these things, but I mean, still a decent turnout on what was like a cold Sunday afternoon. And I think the kind of man that David Gray is, he's very much one to try and avoid the limelight. So I think it probably worked out quite well for him to have a kind of hardcore of Hibs fans there to appreciate everything he's given the club over the years as player, captain, and now first team coach or assistant manager, and occasionally interim manager as well. So I think a good occasion, fitting I think as well that he was the man to score the deciding goal. I think there was plenty of action at both ends, but I think some profligacy from both teams. Both teams hit the woodwork, but thankfully, David was on hand to save us from a 0-0 draw.
Yeah, and I'd seen the goal back. It's basically scored with a slide tackle, isn't it? Which is probably the most on-brand David Gray goal that you can imagine.
Yeah, I'm not sure if they planned it or how much they practiced that in training sessions, but certainly a lot to like about it. It was very, very on brand, as you say. I think it was. I think I remember David saying that the previous day they played golf against the Man United lot and had beaten them. So 2 wins out of 2 for the Hibs 11. So I think they'll be quite chuffed with that. And I think just overall it's probably been quite an overwhelming weekend for Gray, because he's quite kind of keeps himself to himself. He's quite an understated guy. But yeah, I think you could see what it meant to him, especially at the end of the game on Sunday, when he was normally quite stoic, but he was very, very emotional on the pitch with his wife and kids. So yeah, I think it was a nice way to mark his service to the club, especially given that his last game as a player was a goalless draw with Celtic at the end of the COVID season. So there weren't actually any fans in the ground that day to appreciate it. So nice that he gets to kind of have a do-over, if you like. And obviously chance to appreciate the fans, and the fans a chance to show David what he means to them as well.
Yeah, and I take it obviously he would have you get the chance to speak to him afterwards, and I can imagine he probably was, I imagine, quite keen to keep it as low key as possible, because as you said, he's clearly not a guy who has ever sought out the limelight. He just happens to have scored probably the most famous goal in Hibs history. But just in terms of that, like, obviously it's not he's probably not extremely keen on the spotlight being so much on him, but I take it it must have came across how much he appreciated it.
Yeah, and he certainly said that. I mean, I think he's recognised ever since 21st of May 2016 that he is. It's not just scoring the winning goal in a cup final; it's scoring the winning goal in the cup final. I mean, one can only imagine how many grown men and women have David Gray's face tattooed on some part of their body as a kind of tribute to what he did for their club. And it is sort of, as I suppose, if you're the kind of person like Dave is, when you kind of avoid the limelight, where you don't want to kind of push yourself forward and be the centre of attention, to become like the centrist of attention, if you like, by what he did back in 2016. It must almost be a little bit sort of challenging at times, sort of dealing with dealing with sort of doing something so historic, but at the same time not really wanting all the fuss that goes along with it. But I think it's at the same time the kind of guy he is. There's a reason why he's been called upon 3 times to kind of lead the club in an interim fashion when they've been without a permanent manager, because he's reliable. He was reliable as a player and a captain. He's reliable as a coach. He's reliable as an interim boss. He's just somebody you can trust to sort of step up and do the right thing at the right time. And so I think whether it's scoring the winning goal in his testimonial to ensure it's not a 0-0 draw, whether it's scoring the goal to end 114 years without a win in the Scottish Cup final, or just stepping up to lead the club through a kind of another rocky patch, I think he's the person that you can call upon.
Yeah, and these obviously these testimonial days, there's always kind of lists and lists of really recognisable names on the team sheets. But I think these days are when the years have passed on, they can always maybe be a wee bit of a lottery as to who's still got kind of shades of their old self on the pitch. Was there anybody on maybe in that Hibs team that you think he could still do a job today?
Surprisingly, quite a few. Yeah, I mean, obviously you've got players like,
I know Fraser Fivey and some are still playing. So I don't want to disrespect the likes of them, but guys who have long since hung up the boots, so you'd think you still look as if you could get about the park.
Yeah, I mean, yes, it won't come. I don't think it will really come as any surprise. Stephen Whittaker and Scott Brown, sort of very good in the midfield. Still those sort of little touches of quality and stuff like that. I mean, obviously it's not been that long since the two of them have sort of stopped playing regularly. Clean sheet for Conrad Logan as well, who I think had also played the previous day for Anstey Nomads as well, which is quite good going at his age to be playing 2 games in 2 days. Trying to think who else. I mean, there was quite a lot of I think there was quite a lot of rustiness to begin with, which I think you can almost kind of forgive them for. But yeah, I think certainly some flashes of quality. We shouldn't forget to mention Nick Montgomery as well, who made a second half substitute appearance and sort of rolling back the years with a kind of terrier-like performance in the middle of the park and a couple.
Did he kick anybody?
Not intentionally, but there were a couple of sort of strong challenges. There was no holding back, and excuse me. And I mean, he nearly set up James Keatings for a second goal towards the end. So I think nice for the fans to see him doing his thing in midfield, and I think nearly 20 years to the day since his one and only appearance at Easter Road as a player when he played for Scotland under-21s against Croatia. But
yeah,
I mean, certainly plenty of quality in the Man U team as well. Darren Fletcher looks like he still could be playing on a regular basis. Who else? Danny Simpson, Phil Bardsley, even Wes Brown. Perhaps not quite as svelte as he was when he was playing, but kind of thing comes to us all. Still got the touch. You never lose it. And I think Paul Rachubka in goal as well. Probably kept the scoreline down. Had quite a few saves to deny the Hibs forwards. Grant Holt in particular as well, who also looks like he could do a job. So yeah, quite a few players in there who, if there were any scouts watching on, might have a half chance of a contract somewhere.
Yeah, I'm not surprised to hear Darren Fletcher. He's annoyingly one of those guys who looks as if he's not aged a day since he first turned out for Man United all those years ago. But just maybe kind of moving on to, back to first team matters. Quite a few of the Hibs team away in international duty with their sort of respective countries this week, and I suppose the most notable one is Lewis Miller. He just seems to be one of those guys who's on a kind of consistently upward trajectory at the moment. Being involved in the Australia camp for the first time, obviously, and then making his international debut as well. It's been quite a few months for him, hasn't it? He must be kind of walking on a cloud at the moment.
It has, yeah, and I think especially when you consider how kind of disrupted his first season in Edinburgh was, when he had sort of injury after injury after injury, and he's making appearances here and there. And I mean, there was that game against Celtic earlier, or sort of towards the end of the season, where he played really well, but then kind of dropped out, which possibly wasn't so much a comment on his performance, but more just a sign of how much the coaching staff at the time relied on Chris Cadden. Obviously, Cadden's injury has given Miller a chance, and I think he's really taken it with both hands. You look at you look at some of his performances, certainly going forward, he's been a real boost. Under Montgomery, he's had the goal and assist and, nearly a second goal at Kilmarnock in Montgomery's first game in charge. I think defensively as well, he's improving. He's certainly still got a lot to work on. He is still young. He's still just 23. But I think you can see he's sort of relishing working under Montgomery again, having worked with him at Central Coast Mariners. I think sometimes certain players just seem to really click with managers, and I think you can see that with Miller under Montgomery. And I mean, you probably go as far as to say he has been one of the standout performers in terms of consistency since Montgomery came in. He's really kind of embraced that kind of rampaging fullback role that he's been asked to play on the right side. And I think I'll admit I was slightly surprised when he did get the call up to the Australia squad, just because you look at the likes of Ryan Strain, obviously Natty Atkinson's injured at the moment, which is maybe giving Miller a chance. But the kind of guy he is, he obviously came on as a sub against England. No really bigger stage to make your debut on. I know just a friendly match, but a lot of eyes on that game.
Yeah.
And from what I saw, he certainly seemed to, he did well to look out of place. And I think that'll only give him a confidence boost. I mean, he's not the kind of guy I think who particularly needs a confidence boost. He's a very confident guy as it is. But something like this will only help him continue on, as you say, this upward trajectory. And they've still got another game coming up. He could get more game time, and I think that will help him even more. Just a chance to test himself on the international stage, and the chance to sort of really see what he needs to work on, and sort of work with a different group of players, different coaching staff. It's always a plus point. So yeah, I think he'll be coming back to Hibs with a little bit more experience under his belt, and probably the desire to get back into that squad or to stay in the squad for the next international break. So Hibs will benefit from that as well.
Yeah, just in terms of elsewhere, Hibs did have a couple of others away with their nations, but I mean not kind of too much to report, I suppose, on that front. We had Dylan Levitt away with Wales. You had Rocky Bashiri. He was away as well, but I think just not kind of much there in terms of involvement. But I think maybe from a Hibs fan perspective, they, as much as they probably fans do like to see their players doing well and having recognition, it's always that kind of when guys go away, they want them to do well, but they also want to make sure that they come back ready to play for Hibs. And I suppose it's the for managers as well. There's probably an element of sitting around kind of hoping the phone doesn't ring at any point during that period. So I mean, it's kind of obviously good to have for Hibs to have guys away and involved at this level and stuff like that. But to know that they're guys are coming back, probably most likely fit for what obviously is another huge couple of weeks coming up. It's good that way, I suppose, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, I think Hibs, whether it's the sort of the coaching staff, whether it's the players, whether it's those upstairs, I think everyone at Hibs would be very clear that the more players you have away in international duty, the better, because that suggests that something or several things are going right at the club itself. And certainly when you get players like we're talking about Lewis Miller making his debut, then that's even better. And I think even going down the age groups a little bit, you look at the likes of Joe McGrath, with Scotland at youth level, Rudy Milotnikov as well. Sure, Jacob McIntyre would be there if he wasn't injured at the moment. You've then got the likes of Rory Whittaker's been involved. I think Owen Hastie's been involved. Ruben McAllister, I think, as well has been sort of there or thereabouts. So you've got, there are quite a lot of players even going down, through the academy who are getting recognition at a national level. And then you've got the sort of handful from the first team as well. So I think it's good for Hibs. It suggests that something's going right, not just for the first team, but sort of at the club in general, going down through the age groups. But I mean, as a manager, you must be looking at these games, and it must be a kind of caught in two minds situation where you think, I hope that our players do really well, but I also hope that they don't get injured. I hope that they're not too tired when they come back. I hope that I hope they can just sort of come back and hit the ground running. And I think the good thing for Hibs about this international break is that, broadly speaking, the players haven't really been doing a great deal of travelling. I think Australia have been down in England. Rocky Bashiri's been over in Spain and Portugal with Congo DR. Obviously, Dylan Levitt's not travelled too far either. So you know, as well as not, but obviously you want to see them playing, so they're not playing. That's you know, you're obviously probably feeling a little bit sorry for them to be going away and not getting a kick of the ball, but at the same time, selfishly, I imagine Montgomery's thinking it's good for his squad and for his plans ahead of, as you say, like a big week with Rangers on Saturday and then Celtic shortly afterwards. So yeah, I think from Montgomery's point of view, nice to have a mix of Hibs players getting recognition at international level, but at the same time, you know, not having too much travel to deal with or injuries or not. So that'll be. Yeah, I think that'll probably have ticked a few boxes for the staff.
Yeah, something for everybody. You know, as you kind of alluded to, their big game coming up this Saturday, another big test. Hibs going down to Ibrox, and I think obviously there's the obvious thing is that there's kind of going to be increased spotlight on this game for the fact that Rangers have appointed a new manager in Philip Clement, and it's going to be his first time. Obviously taking them, but a lot of kind of attention on a lot of pressure on Rangers as well, and I think it just allows Hibs to just kind of fly under the radar a wee bit this week and just obviously do their own preparations, and they'll be obviously with the results and the way that Montgomery's had them playing, they'll go there with certain, and obviously the fact that Rangers have had their struggles so far, I think that it's a side that will go into this game with kind of fair amount of quiet confidence.
I think so, but I think what the players and the coaching staff, especially that Montgomery, would say is that they would go into every game with that. I think one of the big things that you can see from this side since Montgomery has come in is this sort of level of self-belief. When the team goes behind, and you look at Hearts in the Edinburgh Derby, you look at when they went behind to St Mirren in the League Cup, there is this desire and this sort of determination to get back into games when they fall behind. It's not it's very much not a sort of negative. It's more just almost got like a spark that sort of inspires them to sort of hit back and really kind of haul themselves back into games where previous Hibs teams maybe wouldn't have, for whatever reason. We've discussed this before, but I know Montgomery's going to get so many questions about Rangers when he does his press conference later this week. There's going to be questions about the new manager. There's going to be, there's obviously a parallel because like Montgomery, Clement's never managed in Scotland before. He'll be aware, obviously, of the league, of the players, of the teams. But there is that kind of slight similarity in that both are relatively new to the league, and it's almost a bit of an unknown quantity, I suppose. But I know Montgomery's just going to be saying that he's focused on Hibs, which I think ultimately is what Hibs fans want to hear. Mm-hmm. I think it's another big test, I think, for Montgomery for this collection of Hibs players, but I think it's one they will relish. I think in recent history, Hibs have been certainly competitive against Rangers, certainly more competitive under some managers than others. But I think that a few of the games recently, especially at Ibrox, you go back to the game last season. I think it was possibly Michael Beale's first game in charge just after the World Cup break, where I think people were wondering how Hibs would cope against a team that had quite a lot of firepower in it, quite a lot of firepower that's now left. But Hibs put in a good performance. They were probably unlucky not to take anything from that game, and I think if you can combine that sort of sense of belief that this current squad has with Montgomery's ability to kind of get the best out of his players and have them playing as a unit, I think it could be a really interesting game. Cliche, but certainly one for the neutral. There's going to be so many subplots to this, as there so often is in Scottish football. You've got the new Rangers manager. It's another test for the Hibs manager. And you've got, obviously a lot of players will be playing in this fixture for the first time. Will be looking to make an impression, not just for their manager, for their kind of first team hopes, but also just to kind of silence a few doubters maybe. So I think it should be. I think it's got the makings of being a really good game. I think I'm very interested to see how Hibs cope with a game of this magnitude. Obviously, I think it'd be fair to say Hearts was probably a step up from what they'd faced previously under Montgomery, and I think this is another step up. If we're going by league placings, if you like. So I think it'll be a fascinating watch just to learn more about this Hibs team under Montgomery, and just to see if it can maybe give us a little a little hint or a few clues as to how he might sort of play against the likes of Celtic and Rangers, and in other big games like you've got the League Cup semi-final coming up, and just how Hibs will approach games of that magnitude.
Yeah, well, you've kind of led in perfectly to my next question there, is that do you expect any sort of kind of change in approach from Hibs? Because obviously it's another test, but it's maybe a different kind of test in that I think the majority of games under Montgomery so far, Hibs have they've dominated most of the ball, they've had a lot of the territory. Maybe not so much the first half against Hearts, that was kind of slightly different. But certainly used to having a lot of the ball, being on the front foot, being aggressive. And I know this is a Rangers team that's it's been struggling so far this season, and there might be a kind of element of vulnerability there that I'm sure Hibs will feel that they'll be able to exploit and capitalise on. But at the same time, it's still a very expensively assembled Rangers squad playing at home at Ibrox, new manager. It's a different kind of test, this, isn't it, in terms of what they've faced so far?
Yeah, and I think you'd be daft not to at least consider the fact that Rangers could very well get that new manager bounce that we've seen Hibs get from Montgomery. But I get the impression from having watched Montgomery's Hibs teams since he's come in. I mean, we've been at every game. We've seen the way they played. I mean, even the Hibs 11 and David Gray's testimonial was lining up in a 4-4-2 with sort of fluid front four and sort of fullbacks getting pushed high up the pitch. So it's nice to see that Montgomery is certainly consistent when it comes to his approach to games. And I think as well the fact that Hibs are playing the same sort of tactics down the age groups in the academy. So you've got the development squad is playing the same way, the under 18s are playing the same way, all the way down through the academy. They're all playing the same way that the first team's playing, and I think that gives us a bit of an indication that Montgomery isn't really too interested in changing things for the sake of it. I think. Yeah. I mean, he doesn't strike me as the kind of man who would try and fit square pegs into round holes. But I think if he's got the personnel to play his favoured kind of 4-4-2, we'll just call it that, even though it's not a standard 4-4-2 as we've discussed plenty of times already. But I think if he's got the personnel to play his favoured 4-4-2, he's not going to deviate from that.
Yeah.
I mean, I think we got a little bit of insight into how he operates at the end of Derby when he said, I think he was suggesting that the halftime break was the first time he's really had to raise his voice with these Hibs players. But I think when you're kind of manager like Montgomery, when you instill that belief in your players that you can go out there and you can compete with anyone, and he does that for every game, you're not going to suddenly rip it up for what's essentially just another game as far as they're concerned. Just saying, this is the way we play. This is our identity, if you like, because I think that was one of the biggest criticisms, not just under Lee Johnson, but I think probably under Sean Maloney as well, was that Hibs just didn't have an identity. You didn't know what they were about. And I think under Montgomery, that's something that he's been trying to foster since he came in. There's been the change in culture at the club from top to bottom as well, that I think players and staff have alluded to. And I just think that what he'll see this game as is a chance to kind of test the way he wants to play against a kind of higher caliber of opponent. I think he'll relish trying to sort of at the very least match Rangers and try and get something from the game as he will do from every game. I think there will be tweaks. I think there'll be subtle tactical tweaks that might not be immediately obvious. But Hibs will do their homework. They'll look at Rangers. They'll look at who might play in what position for them. Obviously, as we've said, the fact there's a new manager and could complicate matters. But at the same time, I go back to what I said before, that the mantra at Easter Road at the moment is we concentrate on us, and that's that's it. That's where they draw the line. So I think it'll be, as I said, it'll be interesting to see how Hibs deal with a game of this magnitude. But I think from what we've seen from them so far, they don't really have anything to be worried about. There's nothing to be, nothing really to be scared of. I think, if that's the right term. I think they can go into this game with a certain degree of confidence that they are playing well, and even when they're not, they can lift it. And they've got players who can come off the bench, or they've got players in that squad who can make a difference, who can rise to the occasion, who can relish the chance to play in a big stage like this. So yeah, I don't think there's any real reason for Montgomery to change anything. I mean, it goes back to the old if it ain't broke, don't fix it. And I think ultimately, I think that's what the thinking at HTC will be this week, is that there's not really any point in trying to change something that doesn't need changed. And I think, as I said, we'll learn a lot more about this Hibs squad collectively and individually, I think, from this game. And then obviously you can take it from there, whether or not changes need to be made. But I would be very surprised to see much deviation from what we've seen already from Montgomery's Hibs.
Yeah, I mean, because I think you've kind of hit the nail on the head there. It can be counterproductive just to rip up everything that you've done over this past, say, month and a bit under a new manager, just because we're going to Celtic Park, we're going to Ibrox. I think that's can so often be the problem for Scottish teams going to these venues, that they go there, and I think the one thing you need, if you're going to get a result at either of these places, is you need to go there with an element of belief. And I think it could probably be counterproductive if you've drilled and played it in a certain way for any number of weeks, and then it comes to one of these games, and then suddenly it's we want to take a more conservative approach. We want to and it's sometimes like you feel like the message that could send to the players is not great. This is how we want to play most of the time, but actually just not in these games. I think it'd be interesting, and I mean, I fully believe he will. I think Montgomery will back his players to go out and impose their game on Rangers. The way they've tried to do against kind of pretty much every team they've come up against so far. So it'll be interesting to see that. I think Hibs, they've always, I think historically, and certainly in recent history, that when they've gotten results against either Celtic or Rangers, it has been those kind of performances where they've tried to, impose themselves as much as dealing with, whatever it is that Celtic and Rangers are going to throw at them. And obviously, you need to be mindful of it. You're playing against teams. You've said it, it's a higher caliber of opponent. But at the same time, I think that really the key is always, to get anything at Celtic Park and Ibrox, is going there with belief. And I think, I imagine that is kind of something that's been drummed into the players throughout the week, that they need to go and back themselves to to be able to compete against these teams. So it'll certainly be an interesting one, because you see a lot of subplots around it, a lot of interest. There'll be obviously a lot of spotlight on it, just for various reasons, and just in the build up to it, obviously we'll have all the coverage. We'll obviously be covering the press conference later in the week, and we'll be back for more preview with just the two of us. So thank you as always, for joining us. Thanks to Patrick for joining us, and as I said, we'll catch you later in the week. Thanks very much.